Welcome to Soul Led Creative Women, a podcast for women passionate about personal growth, seeking bold, brave ways to navigate life's ups and downs. So today I have Kym Dakin-Neal with me. Kym has been a working creative coach and trainer for almost 30 years. She utilizes theatre and improv skills in high impact experiential training through her company Voice into Learning. Kym's book, Head, Heart and Hands Listening in Coach Practice, was released last year and is a North American Book Award winner. So welcome, Kym.
Thank you. Thanks, Samantha.
So first, let's just start with your creative journey. Tell us about your relationship with creativity and how you found your own clarity and confidence by finding your creative voice.
Okay. Yeah, hearing that I've been at this for 30 years it was like, wow, that's a long time. That's a long time. And yeah, how did I get started? Well, I guess when I was in elementary school, I was fascinated with astronomy. You
Hmm.
know, they would show us these films of stars and galaxies and nebulas, and I thought, oh wow, that's so cool. I want to be an astronomer. But at the same time, it was clear that my skills did not lie in the wonderful world of math. So I hit the great math wall, and I never really got over it. But at the same time, it was very clear that my skills did lie in language and writing and art and creativity and all those things that your parents look at you and go, yeah, but what are you going to do for a living? So, well, I said, I wanted to be a scientist, but clearly I'm not wired in the right direction. So I've been a writer for most of my life.
Mhm.
I've had things published in various publications, but I was never really encouraged to take that or any part of my creativity particularly seriously.
Mhm.
But that didn't stop me because I just kept going. And I have a theater background. I got my undergrad degrees in communications
Mhm.
and theater. And I got my master's degree in adult education. And I became really intrigued with and pretty passionate about the benefits of experiential learning
Mhm.
um, throughout our education, but also for adult learning.
Mhm.
Adult learning tends to stick people in front of a bunch of content, numbers, data points, and then they wonder why the training isn't taking.
Mhm.
So I started my own company. We did a lot of experiential training work, pretty intense role plays around sexual harassment. Anyone who asks, I know how to sexually harass anyone. So, but with the idea of, training, sticking people in front videos and checking off a box was pretty
Mhm.
much what was going on. And our trainings were much more effective and interactive and engaging, but they were also more expensive. I had to hire people and
Mhm.
take us on the road, but it was interesting work. And then I started to get people who were interested in presentation coaching.
Okay.
And I started to build my practice, and I got certified in the positive intelligence model.
Mhm.
One of the reasons I loved the positive intelligence model is because it's easily grasped,
Mhm.
and it's built on the premise that we have an internal critic who is always with us and
Mhm.
uh, getting in our way, but that there are also 9 different saboteurs.
Okay.
Uh, and these guys are really interesting and based on our positive qualities.
Hmm.
So my key saboteur is called restless. And restless is highly distractible, squirrel every which way. However, restless is also based in being highly adaptable
Hmm.
and flexible and very inventive.
Hmm.
So it would make sense that that would be my primary saboteur, no matter how much I try to work on it. It's always with me. But it makes for interesting conversations.
Sure.
So did that. I was doing some training for the Department of Environmental Protection. They had field operators whose primary job was to go in and have one-to-one conversations with landowners who were in violation of some environmental statute. And these were fairly hostile conversations that were not going well.
Hmm.
And so I got hired for communications training to get them to communicate better. But after talking to them and working with them, I started to get curious about what they were listening for in conversations. You know, these are highly skilled scientists.
Hmm.
They've got a lot of data, a lot of charts and graphs, a lot of facts and figures. But I think we're coming to realize how much facts and figures do not change people's behavior, their attitudes, and we need to grab their attention in other ways. So
Hmm.
that's when I got curious about how we listen
Hmm.
and what we listen for, which is the topic of my book.
Sure.
And I came up with the model of head, heart, and hands listening, which is actually based on Waldorf model of early childhood education.
Okay.
But I saw this nowhere applied to
Hmm.
adult life. So
Mm.
that's kind of, I guess it's a roundabout way of answering your question.
Sure. So, I mean, reflecting on what you just said there about your book being based on principles from, a childhood education principle. So, I mean, taking that, how important do you really think that this play and experimentation is for adults to experience growth and personal fulfillment in life?
Yeah, I think it's really key. We don't pay enough attention to play, the
Hmm.
value of play. I personally do not pay enough attention to the value of play. I'm like an accomplishment junkie, with a to-do list. And I have to remind myself to actually schedule time for fun in my
Hmm.
daily. And one of the ways I do that, well, when I think of self-care for myself and playtime, the first thing that comes to mind is getting out in nature.
Sure.
I am fortunate to live in the beautiful state of Maine in the United States. And while in certain seasons the weather can be challenging, I set myself the goal to get outside for at least 20 minutes every day, no matter what the weather is. And as long as you got the right clothing, there's no such thing as bad weather. So that's one of the things that comes to mind for me with
Sure.
play. But the other thing that I've started doing is I've got a collage station next to my desk with magazine cutouts and a notebook
Hmm.
and just some glue sticks and scissors.
Sure.
And I can take a 15-minute collage break. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a collage artiste because I was just having fun.
Yeah.
know. And so I let myself do that. And in 15 minutes, it's interesting to me how my whatever I'm bringing into it, if I'm bringing a certain amount of tension and stress, it really seems to dissipate
Hmm. Hmm.
by playing with shape and color and
Hmm.
text.
How did you get
Uh,
started with that? What prompted that concept?
well, I'm a pretty crappy artist per se. So I figure pair of scissors and some magazines, I can cut out other people's art and kind of play around with it and
Sure.
see what I. And sometimes it's very satisfying.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's just, kind of silly, but that's all right.
And when you show up for that, what's your intention often? Like why what prompts you to sort of show up for that kind of activity?
It's a really nice question. Sometimes what prompts me is the reminder on my phone.
Okay.
Right? Right? It's like I'm in the middle of something or I'm completing something or I'm frustrated about something and the phone goes off, it's collage time and it's like, "Ah, I am so not in the mood." But when I make myself go anyway, it's like the intention is simply to show up for
Yeah.
15 minutes. That's all.
Mm.
The same thing with writing. I have set myself I've set myself the goal of writing a poem once a
Hmm.
week, posting on my Substack channel on Fridays. And people have been enjoying them. I find it easier to write poems than I do making collages.
Sure.
But I'm doing both. So
Mm.
a friend of mine, I got started with the poems. A friend of mine suffered a horrible brain injury. She is an inveterate nature person. If you put Cindy in the Amazon with a penknife, she can find her way out. She's one of those, right? But she was hiking at quite a clip with a hat that prevented her from seeing this low hanging bough. And so she got a terrible concussion.
Mhm.
Couldn't work, couldn't look at screens, couldn't read. So when she started to recover a bit more and was bored out of her mind, I went over to read to her. And the book that I chose for us was The Hidden Life of Trees.
Okay.
Peter, I believe his last name is Wallabin. I think that's correct.
Hmm.
A botanist and a forest ranger in Germany. And the photos in the photo version of his book are just stunning.
Hmm.
As we both love trees, Cindy and I, we explored our way through that book,
Hmm.
which was so, I don't, it just was, it was healing for both of us, I would say.
Sure.
Uh, Later, she sent me a big batch of interesting photos of strange and interesting trees. And that's when I started writing poems. I
Okay.
started writing poems, and I think I have about 50 of them now.
Hmm.
So I post them on my Substack channel, and they're a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Um, and I've started this thing now where for paid subscribers, if you send me a photo of your favorite tree or some
Mm.
other piece of your favorite rock, whatever, I'll uh, I'll conjure up a poem just for you. So
Beautiful. Love that. That's beautiful. So, I mean, a lot of people don't, they push away their creativity. They don't make the time for 15 minutes of collage or, writing poetry or whatever, they actually should be doing or want to be doing. Why do you think that is?
we're all busy, and we live in a world where time is money,
Hmm.
and it's hard for us to give ourselves permission to do what feels just playful.
Hmm.
And for some people who are really on the hamster wheel of productivity, have 9 to 5 jobs, have kids, perhaps they have aging parents that they're concerned about, it's really difficult
Hmm.
to give oneself permission to do something, A, that we don't feel particularly gifted at,
Sure.
right?
Mm.
And B, our internal critic will just jump all over us if we
Mm.
try something new just for the sake of trying something new and
Mm.
fun. We don't give ourselves permission to be creative, and we don't give ourselves permission to make mistakes. And
Hmm.
I think the two of those things are related.
Or be vulnerable, right? There's a vulnerability to it too, right? Mm.
That's that's
Mm.
right. But how does innovation happen if you don't allow yourself experimentation time? And experimentation time within that are mistakes,
Yeah.
possibly several of them.
Yeah.
But, every mistake gets you closer to a win.
So what was it for you? I mean, it sounds like you've been creative your whole life, but when did you start to really give yourself that permission? What was the catalyst for you to really honor that and to prioritize and value that sort of special creative time, vulnerable time, I guess?
Yeah. I've gone through periods of my life where I've been in 9 to 5 jobs when my daughter was small. I went to graduate school. I was working. She was 4, 5, 6 years old. It was just like I have so many plates spinning in the air. I could barely even read before crashing and burning and
Hmm.
falling asleep.
Yeah.
Um, And I didn't like the person I was becoming. I was tense. I was snappy. I was irritable.
Hmm.
I was showing up and doing my duty everywhere, but I was really unhappy.
Hmm.
And I was making the people around me unhappy.
Hmm.
And there was one point when my daughter was 5, I believe, where I was home with her and I was trying to get some work done, and she wanted me to play with her. And I played with her a little while and then I had to go back to work. And she would start bugging me and bugging me. And then she marched right up to me, put her little face into my face and said, "Mummy, play with me." And the look on her face was so sad and heartbreaking. It's hard to talk about this even now. She's 26, you know, it's still hard to talk about it. I just knew at that moment
Mm,
I needed to change. I needed to change how I was doing myself and my life
mm,
because I was in danger of becoming one of those mothers.
mm,
We've all seen them, and many of us have been them. So I took a little time off. I went to a retreat for 3 days, and it was the first span of time that was unstructured in, I don't know, maybe 10 years.
mhm,
I cried through a big batch of it, but they had an art studio on the premises where I was, and I made a shadow box that I really liked with cutouts and buttons and a portion of a tree branch that I'd found.
mhm.
And there was something so deeply satisfying about it that I just thought I've got to get more of this into my life.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. What
So I
a special
thank
little
you.
story. Yeah. I mean, kids are our biggest teachers, really, aren't they? And then, for you to then sort of let go, it's that letting go. You let go and you found something. Mm,
Yeah, it's like I had to slow down enough to pay attention to what was really going on inside me.
mm, so good. So, how do you then think, sort of, switching sort of into some of your work, how do you think creativity then links to mindset and confidence? How does it help us?
Yeah. I started to notice for myself that whatever working situation I'm in, whatever working relationship I'm in, I need to be very clear about the value that I'm offering.
Mhm, mm,
And I started to notice that if I can come up with a slightly different way of doing things,
mhm,
and I can suggest different ways into problems, different questions that people haven't thought about, if I can get myself attuned to the situation, the group, the issue at hand, then I feel I'm sure about what I'm offering.
Hmm.
Then I feel like I'm offering something of value.
Hmm.
And once I get clear about that, then the rest of me can relax and be much more present.
Hmm.
And for me, that value is almost always rooted in a different way of seeing what's
Hmm.
going on from others in the room. I'm trying to make that
Like a
applicable.
unique perspective. So you're finding your own personal unique perspective.
Right. And the ability to articulate it and put it into the room, not just because it's different and interesting, but because there's value in it for the issue that people are trying to
Do you,
solve.
do you think that's a just a deeper connection? So you're going deep enough so that you can really connect with what's going on in front of you and around you.
Yeah, it
Mm.
is. It's a it's a process that lends a different kind of clarity
Mm.
and a different way of looking and discerning what might be workable.
Mm. Some
Yeah,
people would say that that's actually your connection to, source energy and spirit in the universe and a real spiritual experience. What would you say to that?
would say yes to that. All
Mm.
of the above, I think.
Yeah.
And usually that sort of thing is it feels like it's very dependent on context, on the environment that you're in and the
Mm.
people that you're with. And oftentimes, yes, that's impacted that way. But if you can strengthen that sense of your own connection to spirit and soul, really,
Yeah.
then it's possible to hold yourself and your own integrity and your own creativity, no matter what situation you're in.
There's a
Um,
bravery that comes with that though too, right? And a real trust because it doesn't always make sense. Can you give us an example of a situation you've been in where it didn't really make sense, but then it kind of all came together? I mean, putting you on the
yeah,
spot, but
yes. You are putting me on the spot, but I'm rifling through my
yeah.
memory bank here. Yes, there was a time when I was working in a co-working space. And this story is in my book actually.
Okay. Okay.
And the owner was aware that people wanted to bring their dogs. You know,
Okay.
people had dogs. They were there all day working. They wanted their dogs to be with them. And and some, depending on the dog, sometimes it worked out great and sometimes it didn't. But the membership, I guess there were about 35 of us at the time, were starting to split into two camps, the dog lovers and the dog haters.
Hmm.
And she was aware of this and she didn't know what to do about it. And she came to me and said, I don't, how are we going to figure this out? Because this is a situation that's just going to get worse. And she was absolutely right. When a problem starts to devolve into a black and white binary,
Hmm. Hmm.
then it can become really toxic. And we've seen
Mm.
all kinds of examples of this on our planet.
Yeah.
And I had just put together a card game called Shift POV, which was comprised of three timed discussion rounds on an issue, intersected with 60-second random factor breaks. Random
Hmm.
factors are cards where you're either invited to make an observation or tune into a question or take an action of some kind. And that action can be rather odd, like stand on a chair and sing a favorite song. I mean, things like
Okay. It sounds like a bit of an oracle card for teams.
that. Right, right. So she, I described the game to her and she kind of looked at me like I was crazy. But I said, let's just try it out. It can't hurt, it might help because the point of the game is to get people to literally step into the shoes and the perspective of whoever it is that's opposing you. So
Mm,
that means you've got to listen pretty specifically to the the merit of the opposing side's argument. Because if you don't, in the second round, you're required to take that position. And if you haven't listened, then you got nothing to say.
yeah, sure.
So, right. So we did it. And it turns out that one of the young women who was really opposed to having dogs in the workspace, she shared the story of being raised in an Asian large city with feral dogs running in packs that were extremely dangerous, especially to small children. While she was telling that story, you could have heard a pin drop in the group.
Mm,
And as a result of that story, people started to figure out a lot of good, healthy boundaries and parameters around having dogs in space.
mm,
So she came to me later saying that she was on the verge of quitting her membership over this dog thing.
sure.
And she was really grateful that we had used the game to put together some solutions. So,
So very good. That's awesome. And so what caused you, so I guess it's all about communication really, isn't it? So that's why you created the game in the first place, because it's obviously at the heart of your work. Yeah.
and it was sparked by this amazing book by Chip and Dan Heath called, what was it called? It's not, it's about change. It was their original book. I don't know why. I think it's 7:30 in the evening and my memory banks aren't what they could be earlier in the day. But it'll come to me. But there's a
Mhm,
beautiful working metaphor in the book. The elephant, the rider, and the road. And the rider, when it comes to making change, the rider is the one that knows the change has to be made.
mhm,
The elephant is our emotional state.
mhm,
The elephant just wants things to be comfy, wants everything to be normal, doesn't want to change.
mhm,
The elephant wants to eat its Twinkies and
mhm,
not be bugged by the rider to lose some weight, right? So if the rider beats the elephant, will that change the elephant mind? No. The rider has to come up with some carrots, and the rider has to shrink the change
mhm.
into digestible bits.
Sure.
And the road is the environment. Some environments are conducive to change and some are not.
Mhm,
So that's what sparked the game was that
mhm,
model as an experiential way to step into change and
mhm,
decision and listening to all stakeholders at the table.
mm.
So yeah, it
So
was a lot of fun.
creative, though. I mean, that's just such a creative concept, and to take an idea like that and then change and turn it into a game. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we sort of touched on it already, but in terms of, you know, how creativity can support us, do you think that creativity is really the way that we learn about ourselves? Does it help us understand ourselves and figure out who we really are in the world?
I would definitely say yes.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And I feel like we need to expand our notion of what
Mm.
creativity is.
Yeah,
Creativity kind of gets pigeonholed into the artistic, you know, especially gifted box.
yeah.
And most of us don't consider ourselves to be particularly specially gifted.
Hmm.
And if we're not geniuses right out of the box, then
Hmm.
we label ourselves as not creative. And
Hmm.
it's a way of staying safe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a way of like appeasing our elephant,
Hmm.
the one just right that wants us to stay in the boring, awful job because it's steady and it provides a paycheck,
Yeah.
and that's really all we can expect out of life.
Hmm.
That's the elephant. And even if the rider is bored out of their minds and wants to change,
Mm.
the elephant isn't going to, unless it's enticed and the
Sure.
change is different. And I think that's the beauty of small, small doses of
Hmm.
creativity.
Hmm.
My 15-minute collage break, or
Sure.
just taking yourself to an art show, or considering creativity to be problem solving,
Yeah.
right? If when I was 12 years old, I liked to sew. I
Hmm.
wasn't particularly good at sewing, but it didn't
Mm.
matter. I liked to sew. And I was sewing something on my grandmother's ancient sewing machine. And the the belt that went around the wheel that was attached to the pedal, it was rawhide. It was this rawhide cord, and it broke. And I was like, "Oh, what am I gonna do?" Nobody was home. Nobody was there to help me. So I thought, well, I could get a span of clothesline and figure out how to put that together and make my own belt. And wouldn't you know, it worked, right? And I felt highly creative because I came up with
Mm.
a way to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And that's creativity too.
Yes.
Sometimes the workaround.
Yes.
I do believe that oftentimes creativity is is our response to an obstacle or a constriction,
Yeah, sure.
right? Yeah,
Yeah. I think sometimes it's, being brave enough to do it, to do something from an intuitive way. You know what I mean? That doesn't make sense necessarily. Something, being brave enough to own that, right? It doesn't matter what it is, really. Mm.
doesn't matter what it is. But
Yeah.
yes, there is that element of courage
Mm.
that's involved,
Mm.
and the willingness to just do it anyway,
Mm.
right?
And yeah, and I mean, I think I would say also, you touched on the artist point. I think it's a really important one because I think there is this misconception that I've either got it or I don't. One of the things I would say is that you can learn anything. If you want to do it, you can learn it, right? Just because it's creative doesn't mean that you can't learn it. Do you know
That's
what I
right.
mean? Yeah. So
Yes,
that's important too, is sort of, I mean, and my own journey, what I've realized throughout my own creative journey, I can paint beautiful things, but I've realized that it's the process itself that really holds the magic. That's what keeps me showing up, right? Just like your collage.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the process. During the pandemic, I have to say that the world was in a really difficult place during that time.
Hmm.
So many people lost their lives. There were so many mistakes made just in terms of public health and everything else. There was so much agony, people losing their jobs. I was fortunate enough, as many people were, for the first time, self-employed people in our country were able to get unemployment because all of my work was in person and it all blew
Sure.
up in smoke, right? But I also have to say that the silver lining during that time was time,
Sure.
unstructured time. And I wrote my book during that
Hmm.
time. I had been saving broken pieces of pottery because I couldn't bear to give them up. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I had this whole crate full of beautiful pieces of broken pottery. So I created my smash garden. There's a area of my yard where nothing seems to grow. It's around a lilac bush.
Okay.
And so I did some dark bark mulching, and then I started mulching with my pieces of smashed pottery. And it was very satisfying. And
Mm,
I created my smash garden, and it was pretty cool. I was
yeah,
pretty proud of it.
so good.
Yeah, yeah.
So we touched on it a bit before, but what's really important for you in terms of looking after yourself and your own personal self-care? What do you do on a regular basis that you wouldn't be without? Obviously, collage.
Yeah, yes, yeah. But I also think that I've always struggled to meditate, you
Hmm.
know. I've been getting better at it slowly, and just making time and space to slow down and pay attention to wherever I find myself. And I've been learning some breathing patterns that have been helping enormously. There's this
Hmm.
one where you take two inhales and then you do a long exhale. Do that a couple of times. It triggers your autonomic nervous system
Hmm.
to calm down.
Hmm.
And it's highly effective.
Yeah, sure.
So I've been experimenting with that.
Hmm.
Um, and also, a friend of mine teaches improvisational singing.
Okay.
And so I will once in a while dive into her circle sing
Hmm.
just to hear the sound of the human voice again
Hmm.
in, in singing. So,
A quick energy release.
yes, a quick energy release with other people. Wicked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you touched on meditation, but your collage is probably a meditation. It's just that it's not branded that, right? It's
Right.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
It's like anything where you can sort of stop time
yeah,
and lose yourself
mm,
is, I think, meditative.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, absolutely. So, for all the women out there who want to get more clarity and confidence in their life, what powerful questions would you have them ask themselves today?
I would ask them to take a moment to get clear about the future that you are saying yes to
Mm,
actions. I think it's not always easy for us to see ourselves clearly, but if we take note of the actions that we take repeatedly, there are clues to the future that we're building, and there are clues to the person we are becoming.
mm.
Mhm.
Intention,
Intention.
without a direction, who knows where we'll end up, right? We get to choose.
We get to
Yeah,
choose.
so powerful. So, Kym, how can people get to know you better and get a real feel for the work that you're doing?
Thank you for that question. You can find more about me at kymdakin.com, KYMDAKIN.com. And my Substack, the name of my Substack is The Moving Pen.
Okay,
So
excellent. Thank you so much for coming and chatting to me today. I loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
thank you, Samantha. This has been really joyful.
Do you ever find yourself questioning yourself, doubting yourself, and struggling to trust your inner wisdom and your inner voice? I put together the perfect guide for you, which includes 7 essential questions you must ask yourself if you're struggling with any of these things. Head to samhorton.co/questions and download your free copy now.